Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you former President of English-speaking Union and the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Abdullah Hussain Haroon.
Thank you. Very kind of you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A very good afternoon to all the distinguished guests, the organizers of the English-speaking Union, my very dear friend Mr. Aziz Mehman, Corps Diplomatique, and of course, I can say this, I think, and not reluctantly, my friend H.E, the High Commissioner of India, who doesn't get to see me much in Islamabad. Each time I try and call him to get him to see me, he's in India, so perhaps things are improving that he's having to go so often back home. Ladies and gentlemen, what a great honor, what a great pleasure to see the English-speaking Union, in which I participated for years with my debut in the 70s. The American ambassador dining with me at my house said, "Well, aren't you coming to speak there tomorrow?" And I said, "I don't know anything about it." And he said, "Well, Emma Jaffa." So I spoke to Emma Jaffa. He says, "You must come." And I started off by saying, I cannot see why Dean Hinton is here, because in America, quoting the English version of Bernard Shaw, Pygmalion, there are even places where English completely disappears for years. For example, in America, they haven't spoken it in years. So I remember Dean having the most amazing roaring laugh on that. But Dean Hinton was a very dear friend, great man, great cigar man, Cuban cigar man. And I remember him very fondly. One more remembrance, in my 4.5 years at the United Nations, I had the privilege, pleasure, and great luck to be friendly and to be a friend and a close associate of the loveliest people that came across from India, and that was Ambassador Hardeep Singh Puri, who was not only a dear friend, he got me 9 votes for the Security Council, and we won that seat, I think very much attributable to his kindness. So here we are. I want to start off to set a slight tone to this, where Muhammad Ali Jinnah, founder of the nation, described the foreign policy of Pakistan in the following words. They may not be where we are precisely at the moment. It's good to nudge some response as to what should be an objective. And I quote him, "Our objective should be peace within and peace without. We want to live peacefully and maintain cordial and friendly relations with our immediate neighbors and with the world at large. We have no aggressive designs against anyone. We stand by the United Nations Charter and will gladly make our contribution to the peace and prosperity of the world." Why I say this? Because I think it is so important for the man who conceived, visualized, and got this entire country rolling on its wheels, has said something that we may not be honoring today, but should be honoring. And I think it is the answer to all our dilemmas. Of course, we have some distinctions that don't exactly echo this. One particular one being that I don't think he quite realized we had to contend with the Cold War And the first great war of the 21st century, the war against terrorism, had us in its very, very tight grip. But it is a country that we can improve gainfully each time. And I think no matter what you say, and I won't speak on it now, I'll have to tweak India a little bit further on, but I think we really ought to get down to understanding neither are we going anywhere, neither are they, and the twain should meet. I now would like to say that we are ready somewhat. Things are changing palpably. We are ready and poised to translate our geostrategic location into an asset. And of course, one of the major contributors to that is a changing world, a world which will not be recognizable to many people, not even to the corps diplomatique, as things happen. Changing radically, absolutely radically. And if we don't understand them, we're not going to understand that the change is inevitable. It will happen whether we like it or not. I think it's important, and we in Pakistan specifically must be able to align ourselves with the emerging regional security, political and the new architecture. One of the very important, and the last time I said this, I had the Indian press raining down on me, is when I suggested that one of the great instruments available within the current area, the region, is the fabulous scope of the Shanghai Cooperation. And I think no matter what anyone says, it's going to have a highly contributive role to play in the future of the Indian subcontinent or South Asia, before I get berated by my press. And really speaking, I think the chances are brighter as Mr. Trump takes a less linear view in getting involved in the brouhaha of India-Pakistan. But we have to recognize there's a need to change the existing paradigms of power play in Pakistan, coercion and blame games, which I find amusing, that have regrettably defined conduct of interstate relations in our region. And Pakistan must, and I say this again, we must pursue the ideal of a peaceful neighborhood, and not only mean it, we must get about trying to bring about peace and harmony with all our friends and neighbors, etc. When talking of Pakistan, of course, we have to speak of our neighbors, of our region, so that you can feel comfortable with what is happening. We have had a lot of misunderstandings with our immediate neighbor to the west, Afghanistan, because perhaps there were decisions taken after the Cold War where we led the foray on behalf of the United States and its interests into Afghanistan. Thereafter, there was a flagrant disinterest in the activities of Afghanistan, and leaving a void of that nature perhaps led to 9/11 and its abject consequences. But the possibility of that arising gain, or that arising problem, has now been curtailed by the Americans taking an even more interest in not doing it or repeating itself. Sadly, there is a political component, which I tell my friends in Washington and enjoy their little disquiet or discomfort at hearing it, that, passing the buck to Pakistan is not going to be a permanent feature of what is happening in Afghanistan. Surely, yes, we've had our highs, we've had our lows, but the fact remains is that Afghanistan will not be satisfied by any other nation as much as it must be through Pakistan, because the people living in parts of Pakistan in vast numbers are also the people that are in vast numbers in Afghanistan, which is the Pathans. And they're not going to change. And they will not change their own concept. I mean, one of the great advances of Indian imperialism under the Lawrence brothers was the question of the forward policy, which was meant to divide it all and take it for advantage. Well, the forward policy produced some very good people. Least of all, I think we should accept the fact and recognize the fact that the Wali Khan family, the Bilals, there's so many others, sadly we lost one of them recently, have contributed a great deal to the progress of the area for the country. To see things happen, we must turn back in history and recognize contributions as and where it takes place. Now, coming back to SCO, not that it's a part of SCO, but I think, and I personally believe, that CPEC and the BRI, which is the Belt Road Initiative, these are earth-shattering developments in the world. They cannot be underestimated. And while they were put into fruition by President Xi, who has a great vision, I will regret that India has somewhat stayed away. I was hoping not, but it has. But at the same time, I remember having talks with my friend Li Baodeng, the permanent representative in New York, where we talked about the obvious target of opposing forces coming into the South China Sea, and the constant threat through history of the Straits of Malacca, and the fact that the Indian Ocean will become the repository of 50% of the world's trade very shortly. And we always said, why don't we have a great communication? Not the Silk Road, that does not have the geography, but a great road with a great opening from the South China Sea to the Mediterranean, because ultimately that is going to be the volumes that will surpass anything that can be sent by sea or carried by air. And I'm glad to say that it was taken very seriously then. And I remember this as early as 2010 and 11. And I will say that, as I've said earlier, that CPEC has a great amount to offer. And it is, in my mind, and to my own government, I say, you want to show the soft side of Pakistan, show them CPEC. Because CPEC should become not just CPEC. There are such roads in Myanmar, there are such roads in parts of Africa, there are such projects in many other parts of Southeast Asia. And I believe there should be such roads in linking the South India and the Deccan to the north. Sooner or later, we can ignore it, we can decide it's not going to be happening, but it will happen. The same way as today Russia takes a very large pipeline of LNG through our continental shelf, which will go to India, give us gas as well. So these things are going to happen. They're not going away. They're not going to be, because while the inability of the West to be able to reconstitute itself, to bring together their own disparate forces, from the Second World War to now, it's just an amazing situation. Everything they wrote to regulate, nearly everything, they are shredding the paper they've written it on. And everything that is condemned as never again is now, as a matter of fact, taken to happen anyhow. So there is a very strange indifference for them. The work was done by Europe. It was used for a while by the United States. But I think that Mr. Trump has trumped this particular hand of cards. But before I proceed, I just spoke to someone in India, and he said, "You must quote me at Shaker." And he said, "Quote me to saying, Modi's diplomatic conquests are history and India's foreign relations resemble a train wreck. Here's how government missteps have broken its own momentum." And he quotes the American humiliation of postponing the vaunted 2+2 program as one that indicates this aspect better than most. Attributes it to the Modi government's greatest blunder is to exploit sensitive external relations in its domestic policies. The first essential attribute of successful leaders in history is strategic patience. I liked that. I thought, and on demonetization, a caution to me about the recent exploits of the government talking about demonetization. And he said, "We have been unable to recover from demonetization. India has squandered the clout a decade of nearly 8% growth had given it." And then he said something to me which I laughed at. I'm not sure it would be what would be welcome here, but he said, "India has been celebrating becoming a natural strategic ally of the US, but has let its military decline. You can't plan high strategy while your military remains tactical border defense oriented." I used to think that of Pakistan at one stage as well. And with Trump's new war in Mexico, we could accuse him of the same. So I think that in assessment, he says something which is even more interesting. He says, when we speak to the success of our foreign policy, and this is being mean of me, he says, how can Trump dare to be boorish with the Prime Minister of India? How can Nikki Haley, who's not really somebody in the Trump administration, come to India and order it to change its Iran policy? And check how Modi's body language has changed in his engagement with Xi. And the crucial one, and do you know how long it has been since Indian leaders stopped protesting that CPEC is passing through Indian territory? I said, but that's good news. And he said, no. He was absolutely worked up on that. But I think there has to be a peaceful, and in that peaceful neighborhood, there are people who have a lot to contribute. I personally believe that it's amazing that we still think that Kashmir is not solvable. Everything can be solved. The resolve and the institutions needed to enable that resolve. And if our friends across the pond feel it's too far away for them to worry about, we'll have to invoke the region with Russia, with China, with India, with Afghanistan, with our Arab brothers, because all of us will be affected by whatever happens in the near future of this aspect. I think that I'm going to speak very briefly on terrorism, and some good news also that goes with it. I think we have decided to take it on as a very credible aspect which needs to be handled and neutralized. And over the years, it's basically been a chip or a tool for negotiating with the US. I think that's about its worst avatar and should be overlooked or ignored. But what has happened is that with the European initiative, Europeans always get it right, or fatter, maybe a little harsh, maybe a little penalizing. India is the co-chair of China in that, in the Pacific region. We have had strong movements towards change. And I think that this is going to be a game changer. The choking of financing of terrorism has become a significant component of Pakistan's efforts to combat this menace. And I think that it's going to have tremendous results because we've been sitting in meetings that have decided. So here is Pakistan actually making an attempt. And the good news is that my American friends, after 30 years of no investment in Pakistan other than Kerry Lugar Burma, they've cut out the Burma, Kerry Lugar, which was not investment, it was reimbursement really. But they've finally got to a major investment point. And I'm led to believe in the next few months, two important projects, the refit at Kamra and the largest, or one of the largest companies in the world coming to Pakistan, having underwritten to secure our loss in the field of energy, which cannot come in through pipelines due to sanctions and various other such things. And speaking of ExxonMobil replanting the American flag in Pakistan, and that is now done. So it's good to see the Americans back, and I hope that's confidence in us for having done the right things that encourage. And it's not a small investment, it's huge. The turnover is in billions, and the main investment would be $500 million or so as well. So welcome back. We have had some difficult moments with our old allies in the Gulf. We have seen misunderstandings. I don't see them to be of a serious nature. I think we have to. It was allowed over time for the OIC to dwindle from being a world body to it being an Arab body from the Maghreb to the Gulf, and then it squeezed even more and it became a body for the Gulf Coordinating Council, and then we even saw that shrink, and we also saw the follow-up of war, which is detrimental to the region. I think that what needs to be done is to try and bring together the basic rudiments of what created the OIC. I think Pakistan has a role to play in that, though I would be very reluctant to see Pakistan play any larger games. We don't seem to have really got much to do in these larger games. We just stand there voting. That's not enough. I believe that this is also something. I think that the paradigms, they're changing. You will suddenly see and have seen Mr. Trump's very stiff dealing with NATO and Europe, and very amenable, likable exchanges with Russia. These may be bitter pills, but it's happening, and you might see a lessening. It certainly has happened in Syria. I'm sure you're well aware that Syria has changed course somewhat. And this might even lead to some sort of rapprochement with Iran, who is so far saying the right things at Vienna and other talks. So that might be enough to keep away the specter of war in this particular region, which can be very damning and hurt the economy of all these areas. I think I've taken more time than I should be. Aziz is smiling broader than ever. But what it seems to me is a corner is being turned. What seems to me, of course, there's an election in India. There will be all sorts of aspects raised. There's an election here where, thank God, those aspects haven't mattered. So we don't see them being raised yet, but we still have 2 weeks to go, and 2 weeks is a lifetime in the electoral polity of a country. But that is the good news. I think things are turning a corner. We may start talking to each other a little more. We may start believing what we're saying to each other a little more. That is the crucial thing. I can talk to you of facts, figures, and throw all sorts of instruments at you to convince you one side or another. It's not my intention. My intention to being here today is to speak of the possibilities, create the plausibilities, and I think that is what I am trying to say. Try to put together, not by needle and thread, but by conviction, that we can live with each other, we can bring about the change, we can do things that are better for all our people. It's very strange. People might have forgotten there were times when we were very close to settlements of Kashmir. There were times where the Indians and us were very close. And it's these moments that come in when it seems that political priorities overtake what we're doing. And then we lean back and look towards the more sagacious and understanding older generation with the experience. And we've got so many of you sitting here. We have Siraj with all his experience, and Governor Kamal Asfar with all his experience, and so many more. People who can put together what is needed to be heard and said. And I'm going to end it here without making it contentious. Thank you all for coming today. Great to celebrate 100 years of the English-speaking Union. I envy Aziz being at Somerset House, where I'm sure Princess Anne entertains all the guests. But I'm so happy. We're alive and kicking. I've had a few things to say. It's by no means the whole spectrum of what I wanted to say, but there's some important things I've said. And if those could be incorporated, I think they by themselves would constitute a first dose which might help in restoring some sort of belief in humanity, mankind, and South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.